A United States military investigation has concluded that
personnel
a deadly U.S. airstrike on an Afghan
concluded that certain personnel failed to comply with the rules of engagement in the law of armed conflict. However, the investigation did not conclude that these failures amounted to a war crime. The investigation found that the incident resulted from a combination of unintentional human errors, process errors, and equipment failures.
Khunduz is a city in northern region of Afghanistan in which the MSF hospital is located in. And on the 3rd of October of 2015, on the 14th year of invasion, a man woke up in the early morning, bid his family farewell, and embarked on his bicycle to Khunduz Hospital, operated by MSF, where he would be given a surgery to enhance his life. On a normal day, or so he thought. At the time, unbeknownst to him, that would be the last he would see his family. His name was Muhammad bin Azar, and his dilemma would become to be known as the man on the theater bed. MSF opened up the trauma hospital in 2011 in the northern Afghan city of Khunduz, where they would give free surgical care to victims of all trauma. And at the time of the airstrikes in 2015, was equipped with 92 beds, an ER room, 2 operating theaters, an ICU, an outpatient department, a mental health and physiotherapy ward, as well as X-ray and lab facilities. Since opening in 2011, more than 68,000 patients were treated, 15,000 surgeries were conducted, and was the only facility of its kind in northeastern Afghanistan. And before its inception, during the first year of invasion till the 10th, people would be forced to make long and treacherous and dangerous journeys to the capital Kabul or Pakistan, often dying in the long queues or on the journeys to receive the care they needed. And MSF was a lifeline, a beacon between distant helps. On September of 2015, the Taliban, the opposition in this case, and the US forces increased in their fights, subsequently leading to the Taliban taking over Khunduz city. 5 days prior to the attack, MSF had treated 376 patients, despite the influx and the overwhelming of the patients. On the night of the attack, there were 105 patients in the hospital, and 140 of them of MSF international and national staff were present, of whom 80 were on duty. In the darkness of the night, the eerie silence, occasionally broken by the distant shootings and the hooting of owls, a slow drone was fast approaching, a drone made by the propellers of an AC-130 gunship. The time was 0208 when the AC-130 gunship started firing shell on the main hospital. 211 shells were fired and targeted airstrikes on the hospital with air-to-surface missiles. The attack lasted for about an hour. Mass panic ensued, leading patients and souls present in the hospital to run outside, where they were running ducks as they were shot. Patients burned in the hospital beds, leaving unholy figures in the beds, a remnant of a once occupant. Some of the hospital staff were decapitated and some had lost their limbs.
Our patients burned in their beds. Our doctors, nurses, and other staff were killed as they worked. Our colleagues had to operate on each other. One of our doctors died on an improvised operating table, an office desk, while his colleagues tried to save his life.
Now, since Doctors Without Borders was operating in Afghanistan, at the time was embroiled in war with the invading American forces, they made it clear they were not to be touched and provided the coordinates to the hospital that under any form of circumstance would never be attacked and hence would be protected by Geneva Convention, Article 18. Civilian hospitals organized to give care to the wounded and sick, the infirm and the maternity cases may in no circumstances be the object of attack, but should at all times be respected and protected by the parties to the conflict. 42 people were killed. Of the 42, 24 were patients, 14 staff members, and 4 caretakers. An additional 37 people were injured, some of them life-changing. Since the surrounding buildings were left untouched, the death toll was high, as the MSF hospital building was the subject of precise repeated airstrikes. Even during the onslaught, MSF team desperately called the US Army to stop the attack, to no avail. The attacks took place despite the fact that MSF had provided the GPS coordinates of the trauma hospital to the US Department of Defense as well as the US Army, as recently as 29th of September 2015, 5 days prior. Initially, the US Army tried to downplay the severity of the attack, and according to Department of Defense, cockpit recordings revealed that the crew members of the AC-130 questioned if the airstrike they were doing or about to do was legal. And despite the contrary reporting at the time that Afghan special forces were the ones that requested the airstrike, US Army later confirmed it was actually a US decision.
The decision to provide aerial fires was a US decision made within the US chain of command.
When this news became mainstream and was a confirmed US decision, many news media began to play with the words, with Glenn Greenwald, with The Intercept accusing CNN and New York Times of deliberately obscuring who perpetrated the Afghan hospital attack. Many media coverage and news headlines were misleading, ambiguous, dishonest, and even downright spurious, designed to obfuscate the real perpetrators of the attacks. Once it became exceedingly clear it was as a result of a US airstrike, with the investigations of the hospital occupants accentuating the fact that there were no Taliban in the hospital due to the rule of injured combatants being no combatants at all. YouTube videos published about the matter had little views in contrast to their daily average from different sources and channels, with many of the original videos of the attack being deleted. 11 days after the attack, US Army stormed the damaged, non-functional hospital with Abrams tanks and bulldozed the whole place, destroying crucial evidences and self-declaring themselves as the investigators of the entire incident, whilst also assuming control of the investigation in of itself. MSF called for an independent investigation, with more than 545,000 people signing a petition demanding for an independent investigation, but it was dismissed by the US Army as they promised to investigate themselves for any war crimes they might have committed. The investigation was mostly kept under wraps, much to the dismay of MSF, who vehemently also protested for impartiality with regards to the evidence.
They said that their rules of engagement were not followed in the airstrikes, but these rules are classified, whereas the Geneva Conventions are abundantly clear. We need an independent investigation to establish the facts through the lens of international humanitarian law, which protects medical facilities, staff, and patients. Today, with the delivery of this petition to the gates of the White House, we continue to fight back for the respect to the Geneva Conventions. As a medical humanitarian organization, along with hundreds of thousands of people around the world, we are fighting back for the sake of our patients.
29 April 2016, the US Army announced its investigation had come to a conclusion, and the final report stated that 16 US members and service members were going to be punished for the illegal killings of 42 people and the 30 injuries, people of mixed ethnicities, including children, with emphasis placed on other ethnicities of French and Italians and other nationalities present, which jump-started the entire investigation and caused the public to actually give a fuck. After all, if it were Afghans only, nobody would have batted even a single eyelid. The names of the service members were not released, only that there were 16 and that they were fined with full benefits of pension and 12 back in the field after extensive retraining. The investigation said that MSF was attacked because it had no symbol, which was contested and disputed by MSF, saying it had a symbol on it. The report also said that when MSF called to stop the attack, the AC-130 had faulty electronics to receive the signals, even though it went through pre-flight checks. I mean, what are the odds? General Campbell's involvement in the Khunduz strike, who at the time of the airstrike was the commander of Afghanistan, led him to fully abdicate his position, and it appeared to have played a role in his abdication when he was also the apparent heir of the US head of command, and he retired with full benefits as well. On March the following year, in 2016, US NATO forces in Afghanistan, General John Nicholson, took over from General Campbell and visited a Khunduz hospital to actually and publicly issue an apology. Like, bro, we're so sorry, like, we killed your relatives and family and stuff, and like, you saw their brains and guts on the floor. Yeah, and the most important thing, we're so sorry. We're so sorry for all that. Is CNN capturing that, or to boost some public morale? Anyway, here's $6,000. Keep the change. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. The US military assigned $6,000 for all the families that were killed and promised to build a hospital that was never built. $6,000 for the families of those that were killed and $3,000 to those that were injured. More than 170 payments were done of both $3,000 and $6,000, and no independent investigation ever occurred. The International Criminal Court, a beacon of justice on the global stage, commenced its investigation into the Khunduz Hospital Airstrike to ascertain whether it constituted a war crime in early 2020. Because in that same very year, the ICC opened an investigation into US personnel and US Army in general with regards to war crimes being committed. The US government, in retaliation to this, leveled sanctions onto a top prosecution officer, Fakiso Mochochoko, and another prosecution official, Fatou Bensouda, under Executive Order 13928. This order declared a national emergency and authorized asset freezes on family entry bans against ICC officials who were identified as being part of their efforts in opening cases against the United States Army. The very institution tasked with upholding international law now faced retaliation for its pursuit of criminal charges against those involved in the attack. When the court's intentions of pursuing investigations of war crimes in Afghanistan became known, Secretary of State of the time, Mike Pompeo, said this:
"We cannot, we will not stand by as our people are threatened by a kangaroo court. And indeed, I have a message to many close allies around the world. Your people could be next, especially those from NATO countries who fought terrorism in Afghanistan right alongside of us." The Trump administration is taking the following actions. First, we're authorizing the imposition of economic sanctions against ICC officials directly engaged in ICC efforts to investigate U.S. personnel or allied personnel against that allied state's consent, and against others who materially support such officials' activities. Designations will be made on a case-by-case basis against specific individuals or entities. And second, the United States is expanding visa restrictions for officials directly engaged in those same investigations. We're extending and expanding these restrictions to include their family members. It gives us no joy to punish them, but we cannot allow ICC officials and their families to come to the United States to shop and travel and otherwise enjoy American freedoms as these same officials seek to prosecute the defender of those very freedoms.
This is a stark contrast to the reaction to ICC when it formally issued arrest warrants against President Vladimir Putin, with President of the United States Joe Biden adulating the court's decision and upholding its stance.
Recognized internationally by us either, but I think it makes a very strong point.
Provide information to the ICC for war crimes in Ukraine.
He's clearly committed war crimes. Thank you.
It is worth noting that the US formally withdrew from the ICC in 2002, a year into Afghanistan's invasion and a year before Iraq's invasion, after Congress passed a bill removing it from the power of ICC. This was in response to the growing concern of international courts demonstrating their jurisdiction and power against the US, most notably on the shooting down of Flight 655, a commercial plane carrying 290 passengers, including 66 children that were killed, where it was forced to pay $161.8 million to Iran after Iran threatened to take them to ICJ, a separate UN court, and $61.8 million to the victims of the crash. But this is a documentary for another time. Amidst the legal battles and geopolitical maneuvers, the voices of the victims and their families often remain unheard. Traumatized and deeply scarred, they face not just physical pain, but emotional agony as their dilemma was thrown into the wind. Voices in the darkness, deafened by awe. Besides the low monetary gains granted to the deceased and the injured of the unlawful and unjust airstrikes on a civilian hospital, nothing less, the victims remain forgotten and their stories silenced, their grief and mourning gaslighted, with the airstrike being first denied by the US Army, then blamed onto Afghan security forces, then ultimately taking the blame after a massive Twitter campaign calling out this atrocity. The hospital promised by the Pentagon, of course, was never rebuilt, and instead MSF had to make a makeshift hospital to continue to use their expertise of medical knowledge to alleviate and to boost the low quality of life faced by the greater Afghan population, providing a way out of darkness and remove pain faced by those that had their life defined by it. During the whole incident, MSF team proved the power capable of humanity and showed true courage in the face of adversity and refused to listen to a bully that seeks to destroy and not create, repelling greed and gross injustice with kindness, forbearance, and willingly endangering their own life for the sake of others, demonstrating themselves as a team truly making a change in a chaotic place. In 2015, it was Khunduz Hospital in Afghanistan. Tomorrow could be a different hospital in a different part of the world. And just like the last time, the media will be reticent about it. It is our collective duty to hold criminality wherever it is found and to vehemently dispute it against the larger entity of its embodiment, because at the end of the day, criminals thrive on the indulgence of society's understanding.